All right, everybody, in just a moment, I'm going to be sharing with you an awesome interview that was long overdue on this channel because, as many of you know, covering the off-grid housing movement, I've moved to Taos, New Mexico so that I could document what's going on here because as a young person, I went to the Earthship Academy, and that is what led my life on a wild adventure, and that would not have been possible without this woman. She is dear to my heart, both a friend and a mentor. Her and I both share the same passion for making this information more available, obviously because her work at the Earthship Biotecture Company during her tenure there led to things like the internship program and the Earthship Biotecture Academy itself. So in many ways, you have Kirsten to thank for the Off-Grid Guru channel because I don't know if it would have ever happened without her. I only have good things to say about this woman. She is a badass and is one of the pioneers of the movement who is out there digging in the dirt and blazing the trail for all the rest of us and showing what is possible. So without further ado, I am going to introduce to you a friend of mine and a mentor, Kirsten Jacobsen from EcoBuild Lab. I wanted to give her an opportunity to tell her story to all of you with her own words, because even though I've already done a tour of her beautiful modern Earthship home, which you can check out in the link in the description below, there is so much more to the story and she has so much more to offer. She is going to start her own online course, Off-Grid Jumpstart, aimed towards those of you who really are just overwhelmed and don't know where to begin in the journey. And who better to learn it from than someone who has been there and done that and learned through the sweat, blood, and the tears. So without further ado, here's the good stuff.
I was born in New York City and I grew up in San Francisco. So I'm kind of a city girl through and through. And I was going to a very small liberal arts college in San Francisco called New School. And it was progressive and had a lot of former beat poets and interesting teachers. And we were always talking about social change and how can we change the world. And I was in a screen printing class and we were making posters for different social movements. And so I was doing a campaign that was an anti-sweatshop campaign. There were some sweatshops in Chinatown in San Francisco where people were still working under very difficult conditions and being completely exploited. So we were always brainstorming different things going on in the world. How can we help the world? How can we help the environment? And in this class, someone brought in a copy of Earthship Volume 1, which had just been published a couple of years prior to that, and a copy of the Sunday New York Times, which had a profile on Michael Reynolds, the founder of Earthships, on the cover of the style section. And this was before the Greater World Earthship community, before the REACH community, before the STAR community, before all the international projects. He had a series of experimental buildings out on the mesa here in Taos, the castle compound, and you may have seen pictures of this beer can castle and pyramid and wind turbine and all these crazy structures. And actually, what I didn't know at the time is that I'd seen his work 10 years prior to that in National Geographic. And it was pre-Earthships and featuring all these really interesting buildings made out of garbage. And then I think it was then that I kind of realized that since I was a little kid, I'd always been fascinated with self-sufficiency in some way, not in the way we kind of know it today, but just the books that I read and the things I was interested in. I would go out into the woods and pretend that I was a explorer, you know, going into the forest for the first time. And I loved all that. I loved this idea of not the conventional on-grid structured kind of suburban and urban life. And so I was drawn to these images of these buildings in the desert. I knew nothing about Taos. I was picturing, you know, like cat cartoon cacti, like the painted desert. And I didn't know that there were mountains and lakes and all these other things out here. And I came out with a friend from college to volunteer at what was the beginning of the Greater World Earthship community. And there was only one complete building on that 650 acres when I arrived. And I with no background in building or architecture or anything, I just became so fascinated with the idea of living off the grid, because to me, it seemed like a physical representation of rejecting all the current politics and capitalism. I don't know. I was a bit more coffee shop talk. Let's throw over the capitalist structure, kind of a mini anarchist at the time in my mind. And this was the first time I saw people that were just tangibly, disconnecting from these large infrastructure and systems and making their own solar power as a way to make their own political power. In my mind, this was my lofty idea of who these people were. And maybe some of them were, and some of them were just some people that thought this was a neat idea to make stuff out of garbage and, live in this unique space. And I was supposed to stay for a month, and the month came up and I said, well, I'll stay for the rest of the summer. And the summer went on. I started working on the building crew, doing construction, and basically I never left. And it became this huge chapter in my life. I ran the Earthship Visitor Center. I started the Earthship internship program and the Earthship Academy, and I built my own and traveled around the world teaching people how to build Earthships. And I met Eric in the second ever session of the Earthship Academy, although we probably met before then when you were cruising around with your dad when you were 14, right?
I still have the book that you gave Mike to sign when we went to the visitor center when it was in the old building.
Oh, cool. Yeah. You were a fan of the concept since you were young and inspired by it. And I remember we had the first Academy session at the Hive, which was the former Nautilus Earthship, former Angel's Nest, crazy building. And
oh yeah.
We had a good group of people, and I actually still stay in touch with a lot of people from that particular session from 2012, and amazing things. People have gone on to do amazing projects. And so that was a wonderful time of inspiration and creativity. And I really enjoyed that. It was a huge adventure. And luckily by that point, I'd finished building my own house, because I don't think I could have done both at the same time. It would have been pretty taxing. So
yeah, and you skipped ahead in the timeline because you had started building your house. So you decided to stay in Taos, and then from when did the flip switch? When were you like, okay, now I'm actually gonna this is where I'm living?
I think I'd been in Taos for a couple years, and this was around the time that the community and all the Earthship communities got shut down and forced into becoming subdivisions. They had been land users associations prior to then. And there was this kind of legal battle going on. And the company was really, really small at that time. And it was like, oh goodness, are we going to make it through this rough patch? And I had to make this conscious decision, well, am I going to stay? Am I going to go back to San Francisco? Am I going to move where my friends and my brother were moving to New York and do something else with my life? And then I decided to stay in Taos. And when I decided to stay in Taos, my promise to myself was I'm going to build my own house, because that was going to be another major reason to make this choice to be here. And I saw an opportunity that I had here that I couldn't really have easily anywhere else. I knew how to get the land. I knew people that knew how to build. I had some building skills. Everyone I knew was building their own home. It was like this supportive, their own Earthship home, supportive community. We would have work parties and help each other out. So before I actually built my own house, I went and helped a lot of different people that I knew work on their home, just for volunteering to learn more and to help people and kind of gain this support system, which was huge. I mean, I knew everyone that I needed to know to help me anytime I had a question that I couldn't answer, or find a tool that I needed, or connect me with a subcontractor. I was really fortunate in that way. And so even with all that, it was a one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And one of the things that took for me a really long time. It took me 8 years to build it, but that's just, after work and on the weekends and having a full-time job and not really starting with a lot of resources. Like I could, we could have another whole conversation, like, what would you do differently if you had to do it over again?
And we're going to have that.
Yes. And I have lots to say about that, but it was, it's a hand-built home built with hand tools. I had no power tools. I had no cistern when I started. I had no solar array. This is at a time where, in terms of cordless tools with chargeable batteries, there was just, you could have a drill, and there weren't cordless saws and chop saws and all the cool stuff they have now. I mean, there was barely like headlamps with like lights on them. And so, and I think I don't even know, I didn't have a cell phone or any of that stuff back then.
And you have a slideshow, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I can kind of quickly go through that. This is, so basically when I started, can you see that? Oh, wait, am I not sharing yet?
Yeah, hold up. I don't see it yet.
Okay, let me do that. Hang on. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. How's that?
Looking good.
Okay.
Looking good on my end.
So the area, when we had to do the subdivision for the Greater World Earthship community, they had to do it in phases over the land, so that because of all the expense of, engineering the roads, which are dirt roads, but you still have to design them, and naming all the streets and doing an archaeological survey and everything you have to do to become a subdivision. And I could back up by saying that Mike Reynolds' point at the time of having these communities that were not subdivisions, but were collectively owned land users associations, was that half the cost of conventional construction is bringing in the grid infrastructure to develop a parcel of land. And so that from this land that you own in Crestone now, where you can't, it's going to be super expensive to bring water to it, and yet you're not allowed to catch water, or maybe you are, but you still have to hook up to the grid water anyway. So his idea was that since Earthships are totally autonomous and self-contained, you don't need any infrastructure. So you could buy a piece of land that has no infrastructure, that will never need any infrastructure, and people could get access to build on it for much cheaper than you would have to paying for all the stuff that you don't need, which was fantastic. So the community did get a variant or several variances that allowed it to operate without having to put in water lines or power lines. It did have to put in a backup well for fire prevention and for cases of extreme drought. But other than that, it did not put in infrastructure. So I was technically not allowed to build my full-on house at the time I started. So what I built was what you could legally build. And I'm not a lawyer advising anyone what they can legally or not legally do on their parcel of land. So check with your local building regulations before don't do what I did without checking first. This is a 120 square foot dome. And we literally laid it out by drawing a circle on the ground with spray paint. That's my first ever personal sledgehammer lying on the ground there. And so it's a 6-foot radius for 120 square foot structure, which is a circle of tires rammed with earth. And we dug halfway in and built halfway up with the tires. So there's like an earth cliff at the midpoint in the wall. And we left this space in the front for the door buck, and which is on the ground there on the left next to me. I'm in the green shirt. I guess that's the door buck there lying on the ground. And then we had a little footing for that and lifted it up on the footing and then brought the walls up to it. And then there were no construction drawings for this dome, and they were just kind of general dimensions. And so when you look at the way people do these now, it calls out like how many sticks of rebar and how they're laid. And then you look at my inner dome there, and it's just a bunch of weird triangles. Yeah, it's a freeform thing. So basically we pounded the tires, made a bond beam, made these two domes on the ground. The little trapezoid thing in the middle is this placeholder for what would be the skylight. And so we covered these all with mesh, lifted the outer dome off, lifted the inner dome on, plastered it, then lifted the outer dome on, plastered it, and then filled in between with insulation. So that is some sketchy work, insulating part of the outside wall. I am not the most meticulous builder as I'm doing it, but somehow I'm able to make it look reasonable when it's finished. This is in the backyard, how I lived for a while, just in this little dome with my dog Dreyfus, and, hauling water to do construction. I borrowed someone's cistern. It's in the back of my pickup truck there, and gravity fed it into the water, into these garbage cans you can see there. And then I would bucket it out and like mix every load of mortar or concrete or plaster in the wheelbarrow by hand with a hoe, which is physically taxing and super unrewarding if you're trying to get something done quickly. But I didn't really know any other way at the time. And that's almost at the point where I moved into the dome. So this is like tiny house living before tiny houses were a thing. So I didn't know that this was some trendy thing. Then we built these bottle retaining walls. And at this point, I got my first solar panel and lights, which was so amazing to go from having flashlights and lanterns and trying to putz around in the dark to having a light bulb in the ceiling of the dome. And I had 2 batteries, and the battery box for that was a camping cooler with a vent drilled in the side with 2 batteries in it. And it was just a DC system. So I still didn't have an inverter for power tools or anything, but I had a DC cigarette outlet plug. So I could charge my cell phone with one of those plugs. And I think I had one for my laptop and a few other things. So I had, some amenities. I had an outhouse, which is that green little shed behind my truck on the right back there. And yeah, I had a camp stove and a loft bed, and it was a super basic life. It's kind of this messy view of the inside of the dome. Hard to take a picture of that small space, but interesting to live in a small space. You kind of realize what you need and what you don't. I guess I have a lot of books and a whole pile of knitting, which is so unlike me. I guess I got really bored one winter and I knit everybody like these 7-foot long scarves. I don't know. It was this weird phase. And so then I got to the point where I was allowed to add on to the house, and I decided I wanted a curved front face that would go around the front of the building. And Mike Reynolds told me that that was a stupid idea, that I was going to waste a bunch of materials, time, and money. And I could have listened to him, but I didn't. I really wanted that. And I really wanted him to be wrong, but he was right. But that's okay. It worked out. It just was a lot more work to do it this way. Trying to make rectilinear materials be curvaceous is more challenging.
And I love it. And I think it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks. It was a lot more work, but it was worth it. I love it too. It's part of what makes the house what it is. And this is kind of like, this photo is a lesson in like what happens if the season changes and you're not completely done with the really important projects like the roof and the end wall of the building. So this was rough. That can wall is 50 courses of cans tall, bottom around the window to the top. And again, mixed by hand in the wheelbarrow. And it's a double can wall. So there's that ridge insulation there. There's cans on the other side. So that
Oh,
much.
yeah.
And it was, anyway, I remember like I was super determined to like fill in these last little bit of cans. And I got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the winter. And it doesn't look that cold here, but it's absolutely frigid here in the winter, even when it's sunny. And I mixed thermal lube in the cement so it wouldn't freeze. And I, before breakfast, before anything, I got my ladder, made the cement, hauled it up there, bucket at a time, laid the cans, went inside, made my coffee, came back outside, and just everything I had done had just melted all over the end of the building, all the cement all over the window. So that didn't work out so great. And I had plastic windows where my operables were supposed to be, which is not really weather tight. So at this point here, I owned that shanty hovel completely outright with cash. Woo, like this is the dream, right? That you build your house with your own sweat equity and cash, and you never have a mortgage payment or utility bills ever again. Okay, great. But it takes a really long time. And if you're just one person, and one person that isn't always 1,000% focused on the end goal. I found that inspiration is not a constant state that you're always in, and you have to navigate the times where you're not inspired. So I kept chipping on for a bit longer. This is me and my friend Duncan doing some plaster. Oh, that corner is still not. Okay, we're laying the cans there to finish that corner. I guess this is the next summer, finally getting it together. And then finally, it was like, okay, I need systems. I need to finish this building. There's the dome. There's the curved front face on the right. And I didn't have a cistern yet. And so I just wanted to add on basically like what would be the bathroom there and some systems. And Mike came over to look at the space and he's just like, I don't know, should I do a Mike Reynolds voice here?
I was waiting for it. It was going to be seamless on my end.
He's just like, well, if you're going to do all that, just slap a U on it, like a U Earthships space. Yeah. I'm like, what? It's like slap a U. Oh, wait, sorry, my dog is losing his mind. Hey, get down. Slap a U on it. I'm like, what, you mean like more than double the total square footage of my building that's already taken me years to get this far? He's like, yeah, it'll be easy. So I listened to him, and I listened to him on the cost estimate of what he thought he was going to take to finish it. Anyway, it cost more and took longer. Hang on, Muggy.
Yeah, chill out, Muggy.
Muggy.
It was just an impression. Nobody else is here.
I just have to close the window here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Muggy's a good boy. He wants to say hi. He knows I'm on the line.
Yeah, there's squirrels out there, and apparently all squirrels must die. So that was the plan. That was the floor plan, and I got a building permit, and I went and hauled all the tires. And at this point, I hired 2 people to help me finish it.
Is this a cliff wall that you plastered over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's dug into the ground. And so when you do, this is how they always did the Earthships back in the day, was they dig in and then use the dirt generated from the excavation and pile it behind where you're going to pound the tires, and then pound the tires with that earth. Now, if you're building on a flat site, the main thing you need to be aware of is that however much you dig in, you need a greater amount of drainage than the amount of space that you have that's draining away from the building. Otherwise, it's going to flood when it rains. And I actually did have the house flood when I was building it. Luckily, it didn't do any damage, but this is where having an earth mover come in and just kind of contour the whole site at this point to keep that from happening. So it's dug in, and then when you have an earth cliff like that, you want to stabilize it. So we take chicken wire and nail it into the cliff, and then I did 2 scratch coats of cement, I think, and then everything else is mud. I'll back out on the inside, and there's mud, finished mud over everything, but that's just to kind of stabilize it. And that's before putting the west door and wall on. That's the beginning of the bathroom, which I decided to do round. This is my friend Rachel doing some of the finish plaster bathroom. We made this bottle brick wall. I wanted to have floor to ceiling clear bottle bricks for my bathroom. And so we did the calculations, like how close the bottles would be together, how much was in the diameter or the circumference of the bathroom, how high it was going to go. It was going to be 6,000 bottle bricks, which is cutting 12,000 bottles, cleaning 12,000 bottle ends, taping, matching and taping these bottle bricks together and laying them and plastering around them. And I decided that was beyond my capabilities. Or patience. So we did this 4.5-foot band of bottle bricks all around. That is my antique clawfoot refinished bathtub that I got.
I love it. I love that bathtub.
Before it was installed, that this is 6 inches shorter than a conventional bathtub. And so it cost $600 more because it was smaller. I don't know. Can't really figure that out. This is my dear friend, Anna, who built an Earthship had already completed an Earthship to the east of me, and then went on to sell that and build a pumice-crete house, which is another type of thermal building envelope that's very interesting to me. And she did a beautiful faux finish on one of the walls near the planter. And then there's Ron, who you know from Eric's channel and building the Tiny Plus Earthship.
Where's Ron at? Where's he at?
He's on the top. There's my bun there.
Does he have hair? Ron has hair in this photo?
Yeah, Ron still has hair. It's just really short. Yes, he had hair. He'd style his hair.
Okay, so Ron shows up on the scene.
Yes, he was an intern. And I kept him. And I kept him on for now. It's been 17 years.
Yeah, right. He's a long-term intern.
Yeah, he's a dangler is what we call them. People that just never leave the intern program. And then these are guys from the Navajo Nation that he was working with. The Navajo Nation, they were from Arizona, and they helped. And we were putting the finish plaster on the house. And this is kind of skipping way forward to like it being completely.
Ta-da! There we go, people. See,
yeah,
dirt hole in the ground can turn into something absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's the ceiling of the bathroom. That's all gypsum plaster and growing bananas in the planter. And I have a funny story about the planter too. Mike Reynolds saw my planter and he couldn't believe. And I had no experience growing plants. This is the gray water planter. It's treating the water coming from the sinks and shower, and then it recycles it and flushes the toilet with the water. But in the meantime, it uses these plants to use up and filter and treat some of the water and grow these beautiful plants. And everything in there was given to me as just a baby banana tree or a clipping from other Earthships. I didn't buy any plants to put in my planter, but I did buy very rich potting soil to put in the planter. And Mike came to see my house, which is something he wasn't doing at the time. And he's just like, oh my God, you got all these plants in your planter. What did you do? And I said, oh, I put good dirt in there. And he's like, no, that's not it. I'm like, no, really, that's why they look like that. No, that's not it. I'm like, okay, I'm telling you, that's why. No, I don't know why you won't tell me what you did. I'm going to find out. Okay. Do your own research. That's why it is working like that. So, Ron and I lived in this house for 6 years. And then I rented it to a guy who was building his own Earthship for 5 years. And then 4 years ago, I put it on Airbnb, and it's been a nightly rental since then. And this experience of building it completely empowered me and changed my life and has enabled me to do other things like start my new endeavor with Ashton Wolf, EcoBuild Lab, and write a book and build an online course and learn more about the larger world of off-grid and sustainable building beyond Earthships. I was in a very specialized niche world for a very long time. And now I'm kind of getting a bigger picture of what's available. And that's
Yeah, if
the
people
house.
want to watch a full walkthrough tour, I have one on the channel. But I wanted to give everyone a perspective too of like, not only did Kirsten build that house, but where she is right now. So we have in the slideshow also the Reach house,
Oh
which
yeah.
you're actually live streaming from at this moment.
Yes. So then, then this house in the mountains became available, and I had lived at Reach for a while when I first came to Taos, and never imagined that I'd be able to own a home up here. Certainly never be able to build one. You know, everything that's difficult about building on a flat piece of land is magnified. Like, I talked to one of my neighbors, Duke DeMott, who built a lot of Earthships, and he built one up here. And he said it's twice as expensive to build up here and 5 times more difficult. And I just knew I could never actually build one myself. But then the opportunity to buy this house came available, and I wanted Ron and I to buy it together, and he did not want to. And I put the full court press on him to buy this house with me. And we had an insane first winter up here where it was very stressful, and he was not happy, not prepared. He'll even tell the story of us hiking down to our truck and him falling in the snow, and his lunch flying up in the air, and our dog flying up in the air, and him flying up in the air. And I went immediately to the office and got online and bought him a pair of Sorels so he'd have the right footwear for up here. And, you know, lo and behold, all these years later, he's an accomplished mountain man. And
You would never think that Ron was chickening out and didn't want to
no,
live up there, because now it's like, if you're not living at Reach, then who are you? You know, the world goes to shit, and you're up there at your mountain house and you're unaffected. But I mean, this house is like one of my favorites. It has some really unique features on the inside. I mean, there's so much we could talk about, you know, but obviously I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what you have learned, why you have decided to start educating people about, yeah, I mean, honestly, what it really comes down to is the mistakes that you made and the things that you learned from being really in the gritty thick of it. You know, it's like, I wanted to show everyone Kirsten's story from the beginning. Obviously right now, showing the house at Reach is just showing, you know, how far the concept goes and how beautiful and how rugged, you know, some of these houses are located, not just on the mesa, but also in the beautiful mountains and honestly all over the world with Earthships. So, you know, but Earthships isn't the only way to build. And it's not like you bought an Earthship because you thought it was the holy grail. It's just, you know, because you had it available to you and you love that house. And obviously I love that house. And right now, you know, you have the exposed cliff wall behind you, and that's inside the very house that we were just looking at. And one day that, you know, house is going to be finished, and all of the, you know, things that have been left, like with this exposed cliff wall, I'm sure you have a plan there to do something with it and turn it into a really cool cave. But for now, we're going to be there's a few things I wanted to mention. One is that this is just the first live chat of 2. I'm going to be hopping on after I'm talking with Kirsten to get on the Earthship Systems Q&A live chat. So we are going to be moving away from Earthships, but for those of you who are craving a little bit more information, I'm going to be hopping on that chat. For some of the students who've already signed up, you have to go to the offgridguru.com to sign up for that. And then we're going to be diving deep into the 6 principles of the Earthship systems, which, by the way, Kirsten kind of coined, because there wasn't really the 6 principles quite yet. Which
they
is
were doing
something
the 6 principles, but we didn't have a way to explain it simply. And so it was just trying to make a shorthand for what is the easiest way to explain that. And I think that is something that I've struggled with the whole time with Earthship biotexture, and now is trying to explain something to someone who doesn't know how the existing systems in the world support them in their life. So how can you explain the alternative when they don't know what the current situation is now? And that's a big part of EcoBuild Lab and the work that I'm doing with Ashton, is giving people a foundational knowledge about what living off the grid means. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, misconceptions about how the houses perform, about the type of people, about what they look like. And we're trying to present this as a viable option and a part of the larger discussion around climate change, resilience, and future-proof buildings. So what I see now is that the high-level discussion about climate change is focused on turning the existing fossil fuel-based power generation grid into a renewable-based grid. And also, they actually have to build an entire new grid to distribute the renewable energy. And that's awesome. And that absolutely, has to happen. We can't keep burning these fossil fuels. But we are taking that and putting all this money and technology into something that still has all the inherent vulnerabilities of the grid, which is that it's a physical system. It is an analog system. It is, it is the thing that you're connected to, the wire, the pipe, the whatever. If that breaks, your house doesn't heat and cool itself. You don't have electricity. You don't have water. And there's so many reasons why the grid is vulnerable now. It's vulnerable to weather events and wind and extreme heat and cyber attacks and all these things. They're just finding more and more reasons why the grid is failing. It's super outdated. A lot of these fires in California have been started by old parts of the grid falling apart and sparking these wildfires that are exacerbated in scale by climate change. It's just so strange to me. Like, imagine now if I told you that for your personal life and your business and all your communication, your internet, your phone, your everything, you would have a landline phone connection. And that's how you have to operate moving forward. And that everyone that you're relating to is operating like that, right? That is not acceptable anymore. Well, the electric grid goes back to the late 1800s. Like, what was our communication systems then? What were our fashion choices? What were our politics? Really extremely, what we see now is outdated. And so building a building, be it an earthship or a rammed earth house or a compressed earthen block or straw bale or pumice-crete or anything, and putting autonomous power and water and sewage systems in it, you're building an entire cellular system that does not need the grid. And so you're not vulnerable to power outages or electric rate hikes. You're not participating in this larger system of fossil fuels and the people that get exploited, the people that get poisoned by it, the wars that happen because of it. This is kind of coming back to what I said in the beginning with the politics. It's all related to being able to align your daily lifestyle with your value system. And that to me is super empowering. I'm super inspired about it. I want to share what I've learned and what we all have learned, Ron, Ashton, you, everybody, with people, and say, this is available now. We have the technology. We don't have to wait for carbon capture to be a reality to make the personal choice to live our life in a more aligned way.
Yeah, and the great thing is that for such an overwhelming, dilemma that most of the society finds themselves in right now, especially post-COVID, this is on so many people's minds: alternative living, alternative lifestyles. And it obviously, just being a human, at some point, if you know that there's a possibility to be able to get out of the hamster wheel, then you're going to want to know more about that. And what you're doing right now, which is really interesting, is you're coming at it from basically the ground level. You're coming kind of at it in a very beginner's level way, which is really refreshing for me to be able to say to people, hey, if you don't really know what you want yet, you don't know if it's going to look like a tiny house or if it's going to look like a subterranean house, or if an earthship's even right for you, or maybe living on a sailboat is going to turn out, better for you. Maybe, you have there's so many iterations of this alternative lifestyle, between living in an eco village to living on your own in a self-sufficient home that you either build yourself or you bought yourself, or you do a camper van lifestyle, whatever it may be. And that's the interesting thing about your off-grid jumpstart course.
Yeah. So we have the
Can you
off-grid
pull it up?
jumpstart course. Yeah. And it's, I think I'll just let this video play in the background.
So you have a house.
And so this is just a short introductory video that's in the course, but you can see on the side here, we have these different sections of the course. Like we break it down into what are the elements that you need to put together to be self-sufficient. You need a building envelope that's going to perform thermally in your climate, be able to receive a building permit if you need one in your area, be buildable with local or easily accessible materials, be buildable by the local builders or yourself. Like, you need to do some research and determine your building envelope and understand how it could possibly heat and cool itself without the grid. Then we have reading about thermal mass wall systems, insulated wall systems. We have narrated videos. We talk about the options for backup heating, for backup cooling. There's quizzes. We talk about off-grid power systems and the difference between off-grid versus grid tie. A lot of times people think, oh, that house has solar panels on the roof, it's off the grid. That's not necessarily true. In fact, there's major downsides to having a solar array and still being connected to the grid, which I could go into in a separate conversation. We talk about the types of PV panels, selecting your batteries, phasing your power system. Cooking off the grid is a little bit different, and that's its own special discussion about how you cook. Off-grid water is all about harvesting water, filtering water, treating water, reusing water, calculating your needs. How much water you're going to need? How big does your roof need to be? How many cisterns do you need? Source separation is talking about how to separate your plumbing in a way that you can take advantage of the gray water. So Earthships happen to use all their water 4 times. If you live in a place where, like here, where we normally only get 8 to 10 inches of rain a year, you're going to run out of water. If you live in a conventional way, you need to reuse your water to make it happen. And so there's a lot on the water system. What do you want to do? What types of toilets or ways to deal with your poo, hot water. And then there's a whole thing of, is this right for you? And a workbook that goes along with it. So you can start to look at your understanding and expectations of what this lifestyle is going to be like, and the engagement level that you need to put into it. So there's like little journaling, and then some questions where you can kind of review these key points about where you might build, how you might have to interact with your systems to make it work, and a lot more. So that class is on EcoBuildLab.com. And, we'll probably create a discount code for your subscribers as well that we'll share on a future call. But it's a good basic overview, and it gets people in the mindset and gives them the tools to understand this whole world and see where they might fall on this spectrum of eco alternative and off-grid living, because it is a huge thing. It can be from primitive survival or a tiny house all the way to a full-on off-grid sustainable community that's producing food and has its own local currency and kind of these utopia ideas. And there's a point on the spectrum for everyone, I think.
Yeah, speaking of the discount code, anybody who signs up for EcoBuild Lab at this point is already going to get so much value from it, because really, with being a new course that you're going to be adding on to in time, and the amount of attention that you're giving each student, I know personally from the work that you put into it and who you are and your partners. And yeah, I mean, it's such a great value. I'm really looking forward to hearing the testimonials from some of you, students who end up signing up for Kirsten's class and are like, yeah, I really needed this because I had no idea, or maybe I was headed towards a direction that was going to be so wrong for me. Or maybe just something as simple as I'm already in the middle of it, but I just started and I'd like someone to kind of hold my hand through certain, aspects of the build process and things like that. That's why I'm so excited. That's why I know that by working with Kirsten, people are going to, really have an opportunity to really just really what it is it's you've made the mistakes and they're gonna ideally not have to make the same mistakes you've made. They're gonna save money, they're gonna save time, they're gonna save the headache.
You're welcome. I've made a lot of mistakes, and we all have. Anyone that's done this for a long time has. It's still somewhat experimental, but people always would ask me when I worked at the visitor center, and I hated this type of thinking, is they'd say, everything has a downside. What's the downside to this? And first of all, I don't believe that everything has a downside. And the downside to this is talking to people like you. But but I think everything that was challenging was just an opportunity for growth and an amazing learning experience for me. And I get really frustrated. I think there can be this kind of insular world of eco-sustainable building where people are proponents of one method or another, and it's kind of looked down on all these other methods, and we have the best thing, we have the answer. I don't believe in anything like that. I believe in like anyone that's doing anything that's not on grid frame, ticky-tacky drywall baloney construction that they're still building right now, which is insane. Anything that's an alternative to that is, A+ in my book. And let's learn from each other and collaborate and bring all these ideas together, because the way that we're currently building and the direction we're currently going in is self-destructive. It is not working. It is outdated. It's over.
Yeah. And I just have to say, speaking of the downside, which I'm not saying that there is the downside here, but we did have a good question from YouTube. I wanted to throw it your way. No Name XD asked, how did you get your food? Which, just being honest and frank with people, and just the other day I was on a podcast, and Diamond from the the Oppenheimer Ranch project, he was saying to me that the Earthships just don't have enough room for food production. And I wasn't even, it wasn't even a point or an argument or anything. It was just like, yeah, they don't, unless you really, really, really know how to optimize that system. Like someone who has, been either using the system long enough to know how to produce the amount of food that those houses can produce. If you do vertical gardening and all sorts of other tricks and things, but really that's regardless of whether you have an Earthship or not, is kind of my case in point. Is like, I think when you get deeper into the world of understanding how to grow your own food, permaculture, all these things, then you start to see that really it's like the amount of square footage that the Earthship adds to the equation in terms of a greenhouse, for me, is so valuable just for my mental health and the air quality of the building and the aesthetic aspect of it and the feeling. I mean, I would never give that up. That's one of my favorite things of the Earthships is I love your house. I love the banana trees, the geraniums, the creeping Jew, the aloe vera, the spider plant. I'm not sure if you have a spider plant, but those are all aesthetic ornamental plants, right? So the question is, where do you get your food? It's like, oh, you're selling us something that isn't the reality. The idea is that you're getting all your food, all your needs are being met. And it's like, it kind of misses the point, right? Because the reality is that you at the moment aren't fully engaged in making sure that all the botanical cells that you manage in your houses are like max food output, max food. That's not your gig.
Right. And I think I think Earthships have kind of marketed themselves as that being possible. I don't know anyone who is producing all their own food living in an Earthship. I think if you had an off-grid homestead that was in a place that was conducive to, farming and gardening, and you had the time to do that and did that, that's amazing. I think that's the next, level for a lot of people. And I absolutely believe in, local food. We belong to a local CSA with a guy who's been working this mesa land for 25 years to make it produce, organic, healthy, local vegetables and produce. And I completely believe in that. I make food choices that have to do with the environment and my personal health and all that. And no, I'm not growing all my own food. And I do drive a car and I do have the internet. And, there's things that I'm not I'm not off grid in that I'm completely trying to be self-sufficient away from existing society. My version of off grid is, my daily life and turning on the lights and producing my own power, and but still relating to the rest of society, because I feel like sharing these ideas and showing people that you can be a somewhat normal, if you would consider me normal at all, person and live this way is fantastic and totally something that people can do.
Yeah, well, what you do have is you have food storage. I know that, right? You're also an amazing cook, so you probably make some things that you preserve to keep, for a longer period of time. Also, shopping at Sid's, the organic, locally owned grocery store, and then the CSA. So you're basically like, you get your food from town, whether you go pick it up for your CSA from the organic grocery store, but then also, some people like to process ingredients and some people like to create and process the ingredients. I'm definitely one who likes to process them. Like right now I live in a conventional home. I'm not living in an Earthship. And so, when I have an abundance of things, then I like to make a meal out of it, or I like to make a batch of cookies or a loaf of bread or a soup or something like that. And I think that there's degrees also within, how self-sufficient you are, I guess, or how much responsibility you take over your nourishment and your foods and where you get it from. Is it local? Is it not? Like, you have everything from people who are trying to make as many meals at home as they can, or even know how to prepare food at home, or know how to source local foods, to like the only option is to go to Walmart. There's a huge spectrum. It's not like you don't know where to get food or who to talk to, who owns farms nearby. But one last thing I wanted to say is that this conversation doesn't end here, because Kirsten and I are going to be at the Crestone Energy Fair. It's going to be August 27th and 28th. And Kirsten is going to be available to chat with people during her Q&A section. So if anybody wants to meet Kirsten in person or meet me in person, not only are we going to have Kirsten there, but Ron, who we mentioned that did the tiny house Earthship build on YouTube here, he's going to be there too. So we wanted to get on air and talk to everybody and introduce everybody to Kirsten. And then obviously, Ron's been all over the channel. So the both of them are going to be there at the end of August. It's going to be a really good time. And I guess let's just maybe talk one more time about the off-grid jumpstart course. So that's a course they can sign up for right now if they want, if they're like, wow, I'm really engaged and I want to, take a look at this course and see what's right for me.
Yep, you can find it on EcoBuildLab.com. And it is available now. And we are happy to answer any questions people have during taking the course. It's self-guided for now, but we're here to consult and help people jumpstart their journey and formulate a plan to get started going off the grid.
Yeah, we have really big dreams for this course, and y'all have no idea, seriously. I just got to ask, like, what other courses do you plan to add to this in the future, and publications of your own, like, just to give them a little teaser of what's in the pipeline here?
We're working on a book called Going Off the Grid, a beginner's guide for people who don't want to move to the middle of nowhere and poop in a bucket. So that is in the editing phases right now. And that is a little bit more in depth than the course itself, and also goes into all the different types of building envelopes you can use for an off-grid building, and an exploration of that, from pumicecrete to 3D printed to earth bag to Adobe bricks, and what the pros and cons are to using earthen or mass materials versus insulated materials in different climates. And it has you also work through your own personal sustainable off-grid building philosophy. And so it's getting you to think about what that means to you. And I think creating that vision is really important as you move forward, because it means so many different things to different people. An example being, I know people that believe that houses should be built completely out of natural materials, so that once they've lived their lifespan, they can just compost or be recycled back into the earth or into other buildings. Like, the building should be able to go away and everything should be able to renew itself. I know other people that are sustainable builders who believe that if you're going to build any building and take the time to put any materials into it and the energy, that it should last for 1,000 years. It should be designed in such a way that it is flexible in its interior design to adapt to how buildings might be used in the future, not even knowing how they might be used in the future, but it can, that the structure is going to be there forever. And those are two philosophies and two totally different ways of building. You know, the materials, the techniques, the approach, the design are totally different. And they're, you know, they're both eco, they're both green, they're both sustainable, they're both off-grid, but they're very different. And there's everything in between. And so the book that I just mentioned has a series of questions to help you guide and determine, and that always may change. I mean, I give an example of when I built my house, I was like a purist about the fact that I didn't want to have a backup heating system in my house. So not only did I not put any backup heat in my house in an area where it gets to be, you know, 25 below zero sometimes in the winter, but I didn't even put an allowance or, you know, a hole to put a chimney for a wood stove or anything, you know. And Ron and I lived there for 6 years and we were fine. But when it became an Airbnb, you know, people, their comfort zone is a little narrower than my comfort zone. I just have practice being more uncomfortable. No, I'm comfortable, but like, you know, I put a sweater on if it's cold or whatever. And so
you're a badass. Okay. I get it.
Whatever. And so we call it hardcore. That was the whole thing, being hardcore. And now I regret like not having made the option to do that. And I feel like in my mind, that was selfish and irresponsible of me to design a house that was only for my ethos, you know, like as if I'm the only person that's ever going to occupy that house. And so my philosophy has kind of changed, you know, and I'm kind of now on the thing of like, why suffer? You know, like before I was like, okay, as much suffering as possible. And now I'm like, enough with the struggling.
Yeah. You went through it, you know, you've been on the journey and you've come back. You come back to the people to tell them the good word, which is that you don't have to struggle and suffer to be off grid and all these other things. The other thing that we were just talking about on the podcast the other day with Diamond was the fact that you're going to put together a course. There's just so much here. The reason why I'm so excited about it is because I know that in the future, there's just going to be such a resource base for anybody from the start. Beginner has no idea. Do I want to do a tiny house? Do I want to join an eco village? Do I want to try and build on someone else's land because I got the opportunity or whatever? I mean, you've done it. I wouldn't say necessarily you've done it all, but you're going to bring in everybody from your network that has those experiences and the experts and, you know, those who've done it. Because when it comes to the eco village thing and when it comes to that, that's not really your path. What we're talking about here is, you know, most of these owner builders who are going out and buying inexpensive pieces of land that plan to put something like an Earthship or some other simple structure on it, you know, those people are going to go through exactly what you already went through for your whole life, from building your house literally from a 12-foot diameter, you know, cylinder that you lived in that was half underground, to then building your house for 8 years, to then buying a already built off-grid house that was created by a crazy architect. So there's all sorts of flaws and nuances and, you know, ways that it functions, you know. So you've inherited houses that have been built, you've built the house yourself, you've been there in the dirt, but you also have the comforts too. You know what it's like to create those comforts. You're literally living that way now, which is a huge plus in my mind, because, you know, the solar system that's powering your laptop right now makes me jealous because I'm at the moment renting and am coming on the grid. So, you know, why
Taos has full daytime solar now. So yay, Taos with Kit Carson Electric. I have to plug them. But yes, that's another, what you're talking about now is this next course that I'm working on now with another former Earthship colleague that we both know and love, Jean. And Jean,
love you, Jean.
We're gonna love Jean, and we're gonna bring Jean on to talk about what we're working on, which is evolving. But essentially, we want to help people launch their build, know how to organize it, know how to manage it, and know how to take advantage of all this interest in off-grid living and sustainability by teaching them how to organize their own volunteer programs and workshops where they can do a large amount of work on a project while teaching people these building skills. And these workshops are very popular. There's all different kinds. You've been to a zillion of them. I've managed, and Gina and I have managed a bunch of Earthship ones and other types. And you've done the Dome Gaia workshop, which looks extremely well organized. And we want to bring in these people to talk about best practices for promoting and organizing and, taking care of people while they're doing these workshops and projects.
Yeah, if there's any one thing that I could say would be like the nectar of your experience over these years, really when it comes down to it, all the internships, the academy programs, the away builds, even the client builds, all of these things is like, is there any other company that has such a widespread international and within the United States, so national and international, builds that have, the amount that you learn from hosting people over and over and over and over, these builds that last for years, or 30-day builds that just get bazooka cannoned out in a weekend, or maybe you're working with an owner builder who's just trying to get a little bit more support so they can put that roof on. You've helped so many people. You've been on the back end and on the organizational and administrative side of so many builds that, of course, someone starting off, a newbie, completely fresh, just comes out, to a plot of land, has no idea, how am I going to turn this into a situation where I have volunteers that are willing to come out and help me build? How am I going to get from A to B without going bankrupt? Because I need to be able to salvage materials and have work parties where we're all going to plaster the walls. Like, this is the essence, the core essence of strip away the Mike Reynolds, strip away the Earthship biotexture. Don't even think about whether it's in Taos, New Mexico, whether it's in the Southwest of America, whether it's anywhere in the world. The very process, the very understanding of how to include and market for a natural building, workshop or a build itself, it's an art, and it can only be learned from experience, because getting some, motivated laborers to come and help you build your house is like, that's a dream in most people's minds. Like, nobody's gonna, unless it's my close friends or my family, like, who's gonna take their weekend to come and help me, do some, really mindless labor for, a few hours or whatever. It's a
dream,
hard.
but it's also, there's no such thing as free lunch. There's no such thing as free help, even if it is free help. So you need to be prepared to receive that help. You need to be organized with your site. You need to have a safety situation in place. There needs to be, just basic logistics of where do people go to the bathroom and the drinking water and the lunch, and where are they going to stay, and how do they access the site, and what's the emergency plan, and like all those sorts of things. But, how do you make it into a learning experience that's mutually beneficial, where they come away feeling inspired and not, used, and you come away with decent work and not a mess. And it's a responsibility and a challenge and a privilege to work that way. And it takes, when you're in it, when you have a group or when you have these free people, it is a 24/7 job that you are on all the time, making sure everything's running smoothly. And Jean and I have all the inside scoop and tips and tricks for all of that.
Project management is really, it's a skill, and Ron has excellent project management. Working with him was a pleasure, because every day that I come into work, I know that he is, guiding us and leading us forward into this grand new pasture. It's like, I don't have to come in and think too much. And that's a great thing. Ron has it down pat, and you have been living with Ron and working with Ron for years, not only on your own projects, not only professionally, but also all over the world. And so, yeah, project management is special. And I've been to a lot of, natural building workshops where I have been disappointed, and I have felt used, and I have felt like, I showed up more so to help them than, than it was even worth. And so that's obviously what we're trying to get away from in this movement overall, is to really make it so that it's a win-win for everybody to be involved in projects like this, because the difference is just razor thin, in my opinion. It's all about the mindset. Someone who goes and takes a project management course by EcoBuild Lab before they start could be that razor thin difference of understanding how to respect your volunteers and how to give them the infrastructure and the space to create a space that's both safe and educational, and inspirational. This can be like an upward spiral. People can join onto some of these builds and their whole life changes because they've never been a part of something like this, versus they could, be involved in something that's poorly organized and then never want to see it again.
And it's a dialogue, because the people that I've met that come to a lot of these programs already have these many of them have amazing background, even though it's not a prerequisite, in permaculture or earth bag construction or perpetual motion machines or rocket mass stoves and whatever they're into, hydroponics. And I think that is super amazing. And meeting these other like-minded people that have all these different new ideas for each other. That's the other thing that's really important, is to create an environment where it's an exchange of ideas instead of just okay, here's how you build this. We don't want to be dogmatic in our approach. We want to be inclusive and collaborative, and it's really important.
Yeah. It is really important. And it's been a pleasure to have you on today. And I'm glad we finally got to properly introduce, everybody to you and what you're doing, because it is very exciting. And we are talking about it often behind the scenes. So like I said, at the Crestone Energy Fair, the 27th, 28th of August in Crestone, Colorado, which is crestoneenergyfair.org. You can look at that if you're interested in meeting Kirsten and Ron to just bask in their presence and ask them questions and absorb all of the lessons that they've learned over the years. I mean, just to give people context, Kirsten knew me since I was 14 years old, and I have just been, rabid to get back to Taos to learn from them. And also, now that the movement is starting to branch off into all these different directions, we are getting into these safe places that are all inclusive, that have, multidisciplinary approaches with different types of building, materials, different ideas. This is not, this is not just Earthships anymore. We are moving into a new, exciting, global phenomenon here. And, you and I are learning from each other all the time, and our network is growing bigger and bigger all the time. So it's just a pleasure to be able to get on air and chat about some of these things. And I can't wait till we, move on to when you launch your new course and we can take a look at that one.
Great. And thank you, Eric, for everything you do for the off-grid world. And I love your channel, and thanks to all your subscribers for supporting you. You are super hardworking and creative and dedicated and inspired, and just you are. You're amazing, and you're like a prized pupil of mine that has become this amazing shooting star, and I love it. And I'm thrilled that we've stayed connected over all these years, and I can't wait for what we're going to do in the future.
Okay, lastly, everybody, if you want to support Kirsten or I, you got the offgridguru.com. Kirsten has been helping me produce and publish some of my own books, so you can go check out the Beginner's Guide to Earthships on that website, as well as on Kirsten's website, the EcoBuild Lab. So go check it out. And of course, if you're into this kind of stuff, subscribe to the Off-Grid Guru on YouTube.
Thanks, everyone.